Personally, I've come to understand the 80s as a sort of decade-long fever dream. Now, I wasn't a part of that time period, and I surely wasn't born in it, but I can appreciate a couple of nods to it. And whether or not you've had the fortune or misfortune of being a part of that decade, you can appreciate tropes from it as well. Some of these include varsity jackets, well-dressed individuals, neon lights, very distinct music, and hyperviolence. Or am I just thinking of Hotline Miami? Is everything I learned about the 80s from this? For my sake, I hope not. The cover does not hold back any punches. This dude's even holding a nudie mag. You know that famous montage from the Rocky movies where Sylvester Stallone is getting really ripped and jacked and training for his next big fight? Now, imagine if there was a similar montage, except it was for the Rambo movies, and instead of a training montage, it was a killing montage. That's what this soundtrack is like. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Hotline Miami, then I'm going to talk about the music, how it sounds inside the game and outside the game, and then I'm going to give you a recommendation or lack thereof. Let's begin. Hotline Miami wastes no time building up to a scenic intro. The character is dropped into a blood-stained dark room. There's a whirring tension in the background, and a bum is breaking the fourth wall to inform you that these two guys you see are not your friends. After you put Captain Oblivious and Lieutenant Clueless to bed, a green room and a red room light up amid the bloody mess, and the impression that you're at Kurt Cobain's Christmas party sets in. Boom, gunshot intro. This fever dream tries to give you a guilt trip. This house looks and sounds like a hangover. Whoo boy, that was a lot to take in. Now someone wants you to make cookies for them. Oh. Never mind. I don't think they want us to make cookies. From the exposition, this game does not slow down. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill, picking up sharp objects and guns along the way. The game itself has a top-down view, which helps when you need to make a fast choice. You can see everything in the rooms around you, enemies, weapons, and exits. Sure is good that you can. The enemies have cat-like reflexes, even if they have, the shortest attention span, and though the general theme is run and gun, you can do that with varying levels of noise, which is the closest thing this game gets to having any form of stealth. Stab a guy and his friends don't mind, but using a gun brings the whole neighborhood together like a Texas NRA meetup. Either way, speed is important because the enemies do roam, and having your next move visible can be life or death. And while all this is happening, what are you listening to? The game has an energy and intensity that it mirrors with its music. Now that you know a little bit more about the game, let's talk about the music. As I already mentioned, the room you wake up in after the tutorial feels like the day after a night of heavy drinking. Imagine yourself in the character's shoes. You just killed several men and got yelled at by the local furry convention. You can't be in a good state of mind, and then the music follows suit. The track Deep Cover has a cutting, repeating synth in it with drums that are phasing around the place. All of this is on top of what could be a usual 80s groove, trapped in a kind of technicolor funk. Wow, okay, at this point you might be thinking that I'm talking about the soundtrack like it's some sort of fine, exquisite VHS-flavored wine, and might as well be, because it's absolutely intoxicating. The little scene in the house is a very small part of the game that takes place every day. It's where you get your contracts, but it really doesn't capture the essence of the game. Getting out of the house leads to where the music really has its strengths, the gooey parts. Through a combination of many pounding beats and analog synths, the game drives the player to become the quick killing machine it wants you to be. The tunes are loud, fast, and in your face, if you still have it! Even though with melee weapons you might think that you could sneak your way around, the music tells you otherwise. If you get in the enemy line of sight, the AI doesn't fuck around. You're always at a risk of dying. All it takes is one shot. Look at that. Boom, dead. Boom, dead. Boom, dead. The gameplay is the same regardless of using a melee weapon or a ranged weapon. Hit them before they hit you. The only real difference is whether or not you want to risk the noise or the distance, and with how loud the music is, I'm surprised they can even hear you. Through all of this, the driving, repetitive beat keeps you going, and probably keeps some of these guys going too. When you die, you instantly respawn, and the fact that the music keeps going doesn't break immersion. Respawn times usually frustrate me a bit more, but there's something nice about instantly respawning and running back into combat. I fall into a rhythm of resetting and trying new things without much penalty, kind of changing the way death is seen in modern games with more of an arcade feel. Maybe Vikings really had something with that Valhalla thing. On a side note, another game that did this really well was Bit Trip Runner, with the respawn time being a quick loop back to the start and then jumping right into the action. Most of the music in the game comes from the revival of 80s sounds in modern music and love for 80s sci-fi movies. This little genre is called synthwave, characterized by sharp synths, catchy melodies, background pads, and getting a little too happy over triplets. You can argue that not all the music in the game is synthwave, but what are you, some kind of music pedant? There's one other tune that stands out in the game, and it shows that the game wasn't just a cluster of 80s-like fast beats, and that's the track Flatline by Scattle. At some point, your character ends up in the hospital. The track during this part is perfect for the area. It's so good it's unsettling. The usual snare of the music was replaced with a cardiograph pulse, and instead of having a pounding melody, it has very swirly pads, a bit similar to the sound in the house. It's a bit of a breakaway from what the game is usually doing, and I thought it added a nice touch. Listening to it definitely made me think 80s movie hospital. The soundtrack did a great job of keeping me interested in the game. I don't think it's as fun with the sound off. The music encouraged me to carry on with the bloodbath. Since the game does such a great job keeping me an ultra-violent digital killing machine, you wonder how that translates into real life. I would say the soundtrack overall has a consistent tone and tempo, and lacks distinct lyrics, so I think it's good for things that might need a little more focus. For example, I've used it to study, keep me company while I'm driving, and it's good gym beats. The soundtrack has to its favor that it doesn't sound like video game music. To be fair, it's all made by artists who do things besides video game music. It might be that the use of these musicians makes this accessible. The songs aren't good because they're associated with a certain memory or scene, they're just good because they have consistent beats. There's only one song I skip, and that's the hospital track, since it takes away from the pump that the other tracks bring to the table. I'm not going to take points off for that though, that's like hating someone for doing their job correctly. Do I recommend playing the game and listening to the soundtrack? Absolutely, no doubt about it. However, I do think there are a couple of things that might detract someone from liking the soundtrack entirely. One of those things is that the soundtrack was written by various artists with varying skill levels in making music, and you can kind of tell. A little bit, sometimes. The other thing is that if you're a fan of lyrics, there's only one track with lyrics on it, and don't expect it to become the next Don't Stop Believing by Journey. Well, let me know what you think of these videos, this video style, me, or just how you're doing in the comments below. If you like this sort of soundtrack sit-down, I highly recommend watching the one I did for the Undertale soundtrack, and if you want to see some of the other things I'm doing, you should check out the microphone repair video that I did a while ago too. Thank you, see ya, doodles. Absolutely intoxicating. That's my last take of that.